Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Kyle Abbott eventually comes face to face with Holden and unleashes a verity so explosive it threatens to shatter multiple lives at formerly, because standing there in the quiet, dimly lit corner of the athletic club, with the weight of months of secrets crushing his casket, Kyle blurts out the words he's been choking back for far too long. Holden is the real natural father of Claire's baby, not the man everyone believes. Not the precisely constructed taradiddle that's been guarding reports and fragile alliances, but Holden himself, and the impact of that disclosure hits like a lemon detonating in slow stir, as Holden's confident expression rains spouts of color, his mind contending backward through every commerce with Claire, every unexplained distance, every strange emotional shift he couldn't relatively place, suddenly snapping into horrifying clarity, while Kyle, visibly unraveling, admits that he's been complicit in the taradiddle from the veritably morning. Torn between fidelity, guilt, and fear of what the verity would do to the people he loves most, Kyle explains that when Claire first discovered she was pregnant, fear set in incontinently, not just because of the timing but because of the involved web of connections girding her, and in her despair to cover herself, and to avoid dragging Holden into a reproach that could destroy his career and character, she allowed the narrative to form that the baby belonged to someone differently. A story that Kyle originally believed was temporary, commodity they would fix laterally, only laterally no way came, because every day the taradiddle grew heavier, more dangerous, and more insolvable to undo, especially formerly feelings came involved and prospects were set, and Kyle confesses that what truly broke him was watching Holden intentionally step into a probative part on the sidelines, offering advice, protection, and genuine concern for Claire without realizing that he was formerly a father in every way that signified except the bone. That was what hurt the most. Holden struggles to breathe as Kyle continues explaining that one night changed everything. It was a night with a lot of feelings, secrets, and too much alcohol. This night changed everything. Claire did not mean for things to go this far, but fear makes people choose to be quiet instead of honest. Now that silence is like a bomb that is going to explode at the possible moment. This is especially true with the baby's due date approaching and the walls closing in from every direction. Holden's anger eventually erupts, his voice shaking as he demands to know how long Kyle has known. He wants to know how times Kyle looked him in the eye and did not tell him the truth. Kyle does not back down as he admits it has been months. He says he had sleepless nights, months of practicing what to say, months of telling himself he was doing the right thing by waiting for the right time. He now realizes that the right time was just an excuse. The truth only hurts the longer it is hidden. As Holden paces the room, fists clenched, he thinks about the past. He remembers when things were Claire's smiles, her mood swings, her refusal to let him go to certain events, the way she would get defensive whenever the baby's future was discussed. Every memory now feels like a betrayal, not by Claire but by Kyle, someone he trusted. Kyle chose to keep quiet, of being honest. Kyle tries to fix things, saying that Claire does care, that her fear came from loving Holden much and believing that telling the truth would hurt him. But Holden says that love based on lies is not love, all its control. He feels like he has been robbed of moments with the baby, and that is something that cannot be replaced. Holden is very upset, with Kyle and Claire. He feels like his whole world is falling apart. Moments he'll no way get back, like hearing the baby's twinkle for the first time or being part of the early opinions that shape a child's future. The battle intensifies as Kyle reveals one final, ruinous detail: the verity is on the verge of coming out whether they want it to or not, because medical paperwork, inheritable testing, and curious eyes are formally circling, meaning Holden is running out of time to decide how he wants to step into his child's life, still, strongly, or not. At each, and that choice now rests exactly on his shoulders, Holden's fury sluggishly gives way to commodity, deeper and more dangerous, resoluteness, as he realizes that no matter how angry he is, there's a child out there who shares his blood, a child who deserves further than falsehoods and half-trueness, and he makes it clear that he'll defy Claire himself, on his terms, without Kyle acting as a buffer or a doorkeeper any longer. Kyle, visibly shaken, knows that by telling Holden the verity, he has set off a chain response he can no longer control, one that will ripple through the Abbott family, shatter Claire's precisely guarded world, and potentially expose secrets that reach far beyond the single maternity stunner. As Holden storms out, the weight of impending fallout hangs heavy in the air, because this disclosure doesn't just change who the baby belongs to, it rewrites connections, redraws commitment, and threatens to enkindle a war of feelings that could leave no bone unscathed. And as Kyle stands alone, gaping into the empty space Holden left before, it becomes sorrowfully clear that in Genoa City, the Verity always finds a way to face, and when it does, it no way arrives gently, setting the stage for heartache, battle, and consequences that will echo for times to come on the young and the restless. The fallout from Kyle's concession doesn't pause for breath, rather it spreads through Genoa City like campfire, because formerly Holden leaves the athletic club with that Verity burning in his casket. The air itself seems charged with ineluctability, and every step he takes toward defying Claire feels heavier than the last, his mind torn between fury and a fierce, unanticipated protectiveness that terrifies him just as important as the treason does, while across City Claire senses that commodity has shifted, and nearly physical pressure tensing around her as if the macrocosm itself is preparing to collect on the taradiddle she's been living. And when Holden eventually appears at her door unannounced, his expression cold and undecipherable, she knows incontinently that the fragile vision she's erected is about to collapse. Their battle is raw and undressed, with Holden demanding answers and Claire dissolving into gashes as the Verity spills out in fractured admissions, her voice shaking as she admits she was hysterical of judgment, hysterical of losing control, hysterical that Holden would walk down if he knew the full Verity. And yet her fear only energizes Holden's rage, because he realizes that she made a unilateral decision that stole his agency as a father before he indeed knew he was one, and as the argument escalates, every unsaid word, every retired regard, every moment of vacillation from the history comes crashing into the present, creating a storm neither of them can escape. Meanwhile Kyle's decision to eventually tell the Verity sets off its own chain response, because secrets in Genoa City no way live in insulation, and whispers begin to circulate nearly incontinently, first among those closest to the situation and also outward, as Jack Abbott senses commodity is wrong with his son, pushing Kyle until the guilt becomes unsupportable and Kyle confesses everything, egging Jack's shock to turn into stern disappointment as he reminds Kyle that honesty delayed is honesty denied, and that the Abbott name has been dragged into enough dishonors without adding another erected on deception. Nikki and Victor Newman soon catch wind of the fermentation as well, because any implicit error at law or reproach involving maternity is always of interest to Victor, who incontinently begins calculating issues, alliances, and influence, seeing the baby not just as a child but as a implicit pawn in a much larger game, while Nikki, more emotionally attuned, worries about the emotional damage this disclosure will induce on an innocent life before it has indeed begun. Back at Claire's place, the argument with Holden takes a ruinous turn when Holden vows that he'll be part of his child's life no matter what, not as a secret, not as a shadow figure lurking on the sidelines, but openly and unapologetically, indeed if that means exposing the Verity to everyone Claire has been trying to cover herself from, and her fear escalates as she realizes that the narrative she drafted so precisely is slipping through her fritters, because formerly Holden speaks out. There will be no stopping the avalanche of consequences. The emotional stakes rise indeed advanced when Claire reveals that she's formerly felt the baby move, a small, intimate moment she endured alone, and Holden's wrathfulness fractures into heartache as he realizes just how important he's formerly missed, how numerous irreplaceable moments were stolen by fear and silence, and in that moment his resoluteness hardens into commodity unbreakable, a pledge to himself and to the future child that he'll no way again allow falsehoods to mandate his part as a father. Away Kyle spirals under the weight of what he's unleashed, questioning whether telling the Verity was an act of courage or selfish forgiveness, especially as he watches the people around him brace for impact, because Summer, seeing his torture, pushes him for answers, and when she learns the Verity, her response is explosive, criminating Kyle of playing God with people's lives and reminding him that intentions don't abolish consequences, leaving Kyle insulated and shaken, forced to defy the reality that doing the right thing doesn't always come with remission. As the days pass, the pressure only intensifies, with Holden consulting attorneys to understand his rights, determined to ensure that his child will carry his name and know the Verity from the veritably mourning, while Claire grapples with the intimidating possibility of public exposure, her precisely curated image at threat of total destruction, and the stress takes a visible risk on her health. egging Enterprises that the emotional strain could jeopardize the gestation itself, a consummation that shortly softens Holden's wrathfulness as he's reminded that despite everything, Claire is still carrying their child, and guarding that life must come first. Yet indeed that fragile armistice is hovered when an unanticipated complication arises during a routine scan, forcing Claire and Holden into the same room under dire circumstances, where sweat overrides resentment and they cleave to each other for support, revealing that beneath the treason there's still an important, undetermined bond neither of them can completely deny. News of the complication spreads snappily, drawing in family members and reigniting old battles as everyone chooses sides, some rallying around Claire out of sympathy, others backing Holden's right to the verity, and Genoa City becomes a battlefield of opinions, judgments, and rumored allegations, each discussion adding energy to an formerly raging fire. Victor seizes the moment to ply influence, offering support to Holden while subtly steering the situation in ways that profit his own long-term interests, while Jack pushes Kyle to step up and take responsibility for the mess he helped produce, prompting him to be honest with everyone involved no matter how painful it becomes, because half-trueness will only consolidate the injuries. As the baby's due date draws closer, the pressure reaches a breaking point when a blurted medical record confirms Holden's maternity beyond any mistrustfulness, turning Enterprise into an arguable fact and kindling a full-bloated reproach that jewels Genoa City to its core, forcing Claire to face the verity she's been running from and compelling Holden to intimately claim his child in a dramatic battle that leaves no room for denial. The disclosure fractures connections across the board, alliances deteriorate, and long-standing grievances resurface, because in Genoa City every secret is connected to another, and this bone has exposed fault lines that were formerly dangerously close to the face. Yet amid the chaos there's also metamorphosis, as Holden begins to fantasize a unborn defined not by wrathfulness but by responsibility and love, determined to break the cycle of deception and give his child the stability he was denied, while Claire is forced into a painful reckoning with herself, defying the reality that sweat-driven choices can have ruinous consequences, and Kyle, stripped of visions, learns that verity isn't a single moment of concession but an ongoing commitment to responsibility. As the story hurtles toward the baby's birth, the stakes couldn't be advanced, because that child represents both the cost of falsehoods and the possibility of redemption, a chance for shattered hearts to rebuild commodity honest from the remains. And as Genoa City braces for what comes next, one thing becomes sorrowfully clear: this shocking disclosure has changed everything, and when the baby eventually arrives, it won't just bring new life into the world, it'll force every person involved to defy who they truly are, setting the stage for a new period of love, conflict, and consequences that will echo through the young and the restless for times to come. The weeks leading up to the baby's birth feel like a grim emotional marathon, with every character in Genoa City bracing for impact as the verity about Holden's maternity reshapes alliances and exposes long-buried precariousness, because indeed as the reproach begins to settle into a grim new normal, its foreshocks continue to ripple outward, touching lives in ways no bone could have prognosticated, and nowhere is that further apparent than in Holden himself, who finds that stepping into the part of an expectant father is far more complicated than simply claiming the verity, as he struggles with the fear that his child's first story will always be defined by treason and public demotion rather than love. Determined to change that narrative, Holden makes a conscious decision to show up constantly and visibly, attending movables when allowed, setting up a nursery space of his own, and educating himself on every detail of motherhood, not because he wants to prove commodity to Claire or to Genoa City, but because he refuses to let his child ever misdoubt that they were wanted, a resoluteness that sluggishly begins to soften public perception and forces indeed his harshest critics to admit the sincerity of his commitment. Claire, meanwhile, undergoes a profound internal metamorphosis, as the collapse of her precisely controlled world leaves her with nowhere to hide from her own choices. And while shame and remorse hang to overwhelm her, she also begins to understand that responsibility, still painful, is the only path forward, egging her to make the delicate decision to issue a public statement admitting the verity, not as unreason but as unreason. A moment of raw vulnerability that shocks Genoa City and earns her unanticipated sympathy from those who face the courage it takes to admit fault so openly. Kyle's trip is inversely fraught, as he wrestles with the reality that telling the verity didn't magically vindicate him of guilt, but rather demanded that he live with the consequences of his silence, and in a rare moment of modesty he seeks out Holden to apologize face to face, not to justify his conduct but to enjoy them completely, a discussion that's tense and uncomfortable yet eventually necessary, because Holden, though still deeply hurt, acknowledges that without Kyle's concession he might no way have known his child at each, and that recognition marks the morning of a fragile, uneasy armistice. As the due date looms, pressure harpoons formerly again when clashing fancies for the future hang to ail the fragile peace, with legal agreements, guardianship arrangements, and co-parenting boundaries getting battlefields for undetermined feelings, because beneath every practical discussion lies a deeper question of trust, and whether it can truly be rebuilt after similar profound deception, a question that neither Holden nor Claire can answer with certainty. The emotional climax arrives in the delivery room, where sweat strips down pretense and resentment likewise, and as complications arise during labor, the graveness of the moment forces everyone to defy what truly matters, with Holden and Claire united by participated terror and stopgap as they await the appearance of their child, their hands clasped not as suckers but as two people bound by an unbreakable responsibility. When the baby is eventually born, the room is filled with a silence that feels nearly sacred, because in that moment the chaos, reproach, and heartache that led to this moment fade into the background, replaced by the inarguable reality of new life, and as Holden holds his child for the first time, the weight of the once collides with the pledge of the future, leaving him overwhelmed by a love so fierce it eclipses indeed his wrathfulness, while Claire watches through gashes, understanding that no matter what happens coming, this child will always be the one thing they did right together. News of the birth spreads snappily, but its impact is markedly different from the reproach that anteceded it, because rather of whispers and judgment there's a sense of conservative stopgap, a recognition that while miscalculations have been made, redemption is still possible. And as Genoa City begins to recalibrate around this new reality, connections start to shift in subtle but meaningful ways. Victor, ever realistic, reassesses his strategy, fating that the baby is no longer a pawn but a person, and while he no way completely relinquishes his instinct to control issues, indeed he finds himself suddenly softened by the sight of Holden stepping confidently into motherhood, while Nikki reaches out to Claire, offering support born of her own jests with public reproach and hard-earned wisdom. Jack, proud yet sober, reminds Kyle that growth frequently comes through failure, and that the true measure of character is not avoiding miscalculations but facing them actually, a assignment Kyle takes to heart as he commits to rebuilding trust one action at a time rather than through grand gestures. As weeks turn into months, a conditional meter emerges, with co-parenting routines established and boundaries admired, and though the injuries of the history haven't completely healed, there's a sense that commodity stronger is being erected in their place, commodity predicated in verity rather than vision. Eventually, the disclosure that began as a shocking treason evolves into a catalyst for change, forcing every person involved to defy their fears, review their values, and choose a path forward that prioritizes honesty over comfort. And as Holden looks down at his child, apprehensive that their story will always include the verity of how they came into the world, he also knows that it'll be shaped by the choices made from this point on. Choices that have the power to transfigure pain into purpose, setting the stage for a future that, while amiss, is incontrovertibly real, and in true youthful and the restless fashion, this new morning promises not an end to drama, but a deeper, more reverberative disquisition of love, responsibility, and redemption in Genoa City. As things start to feel a little more stable, the past still has a way of hanging. In Genoa City, secrets never really go away without leaving some kind of mark. The truth about the baby's mom is still affecting people in unexpected ways. It is testing how well everyone can handle their emotions. Holden is really into being a mom. She is finding out that love does not make bad feelings go away. There are times like in the middle of the night when it is quiet when she feels angry again. She wonders what would have happened if people had been honest from the start. But when she starts to think about those things, much one look at her baby's face brings her back. It reminds her that even though the past is set, she can still control what happens next. The baby is still a part of Holden's life. The baby's face is what keeps Holden going. Claire is also dealing with some stuff. It is taking a while for people to trust her again. Some relationships are not totally real. Being a parent is making her stronger. The baby is making her see things in a way The baby and Holden are connected. The baby and Claire are connected too.